Hello and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Noel, and today I'm here with Gil Fink. He's the SparkSys CEO. We're here today to talk about making sense of web rendering patterns. How's it going, Gil?
I'm fine, thank you.
So this was a talk you gave at IJS London, or is that correct?
Oh, it's a talk I gave in an international JavaScript conference in Munich as a keynote.
Oh, I see.
And I'm going to deliver the same keynote also in IJS International JavaScript Conference in London in 2 months, I think, or 3 months from now.
So, okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
I'm working in the high-tech industry for more than 20 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in web development across all those years. And it's interesting to see that the old patterns are coming back and the new patterns emerge and things like that. And then the wheels start to spin again and you see the old patterns coming back again in different ways or different things.
Yeah. It kind of seems like, concerns shifted a little bit. For a long time, it was all kind of about, we thought, user experience and developer productivity, and it was like, well, just push everything to the front end. Stuff's pretty quick. And I think things got pretty good there. We hit like, a local maxima on that curve, and now it's kind of like, okay, well, what else can we do? It's like, well, we can increase performance by taking on some of these old things, but I do think it is led us to a state where it's a lot.
Yeah. It's a very interesting topic because the thing is, you pick one of the patterns at the beginning of the application creation, and then you are like stuck with it in some sort of way, or sometimes the framework that you are choosing is hiding all the details and does for you the patterns that we're going to talk about in this talk. So it's like this is the starting point, and I think that if people aren't aware of that, this talk is covering things like server-side rendering or SSR or CSR, client-side rendering, static rendering, what it's all about, and even islands and resumability, which are new kids on the block, but these are the buzzy things right now in the industry. So we're trying to solve the way to ship content or meaningful content to the client. That's the idea of rendering patterns.
Yeah, right.
And there are very, very, very variety of ways to do that, and let's drill down into them.
You mentioned it here, and I want to touch on it briefly. That there's like framework is a very large decision here, where it feels like the way that this decision actually manifests for most developers is what framework you're going to be using, or a framework kind of with what flags enabled, like how are you going to use a given framework? Because something like Next can kind of be done several ways, or like, Svelte, or like you can use Svelte kit in a few different ways, but like I think that this manifests largely in like what framework are you choosing to use and what does it support and kind of what are its what's the first class citizen there.
Out of the box, you said Next, so I'm working a lot with Next and lately, and they are coming with SSR in mind. They started as a server-side rendering framework, and now they are also giving you opportunity to do static rendering with flags or with the ways of implementing pages. But you need to know that they do that, and you need to know that at first they came out as a SSR framework. If you're talking about, for example, Astro, which is islands framework, then what is islands? If you're like taking this technology, understand what you're trying to solve with the island architecture. If you're going to Qwik is a resumability framework. So if you pick Qwik, you're going to do resumability in your implementation. Et cetera. So there is no silver bullet to all of the solutions. Each framework comes with its trade-off of the practices, and it's up to you at the beginning of the project to pick the framework that you want, or I don't know if you want, but your managers want.
Yeah. There's a balance of the one you want and optimal performance and capacity to make changes and all these things. It's always a balance, right?
Yeah, but And understanding what are the impacts on performance are good
Yeah.
knowledge at the beginning of the project. Because if you're like going the SSR way, then the performance is like you are going to create all the pages on the server side and then ship them to the client baked. And the client is like, getting it and rendering it. So the time to the first byte of the content is going to be very, very long, not very long, but long because of the choice that you did. And if you're like having infrastructure in the cloud, then you're going to pay a lot of money to your cloud provider because you're going to spin a lot of CPU to generate each and every page for each and every user that comes to your application. So this is
Right.
this is a trade-off. But
Yeah.
if you're going the CSR way, the client-side rendering way, for example, I don't know if you used TanStack Start. They shipped TanStack shipped a new, not new, but a framework that gives you the ability. They are more CSR directed. So if you're going that way, then you're like shipping to the client the page, and it's like rendering. I won't say very fast because you're waiting to all the hydration. If you're using React or Angular or any other framework that uses hydration underneath, you're like wasting a lot of time with hydration to render the page in the client side. So you are going to put spinners or loaders or all the, sorry to say, bad practice things in order to say to the user, hey, we're waiting for everything to, load, wait. And even after the page is like loading, you have a waiting time up until all the event handlers are wired in the application. So you are like with vibrations, stall the interactivity of your page. And that's not a good way of for user experience. So you are like paying in one way or the user experience, but you give another user experience like showing the page is super fast or the first byte is loading very fast. Okay, so those are the things that then we need to remember. The trade-off. Each and every pattern gives you a good way of implementing some stuff, but takes some other stuff like, for example, performance or things like interactivity and etc. Or fast
Yeah.
interactivity, should I say?
I feel that most people, most developers at least, that are spending any significant time in this space, kind of have an intuition on if a given app, is reasonable to have it be like almost fully static. It's like there's like very little meaningful interactivity here. Maybe there's like a couple things on a couple pages, but we can serve it static. There's not enough trade-off for it to really matter. And then I think devs also kind of, at least maybe this is anecdotal, but I suspect that devs also know like this is, or they have an intuition around this app is like a dashboard that people are leaving open for a long time or they're at all day. And it's like, we could probably leave this client side and not, take like have too much of a performance hit because it's all going to be data in and data out at the end of the day anyway. I think that discussion is a little more nuanced. But do you think that do you think that is right, like a correct impulse, or is there like should those devs be kind of inspecting that decision a little more and looking at something like partial server side rendering or the islands architecture?
Again, as you said, it depends on what you're building and what are your users. If you're building a blog or a news website, then most of the content that you're going to serve is static. So why not go in the static rendering way? And then add a little bit of interactivity if you need some interactivity buttons or something like that. If you're creating a full-blown application that is gated by some, logging and etc., probably you're going to go to the client-side rendering way. But in most of the frameworks today, for example, in Next, in other frameworks that I used, you can combine some of the patterns together or create, how should I say it, progressive enhancement of your entire application, meaning you are going to ship some, the layout, the main layout as a static rendered HTML, and then add the content or things like that with the client side fetch or with the hydration or things like that. And this is, I think, where we're heading. But
Yeah.
saying I'm going to do only CSR or I'm going to do only SSR, it's like you're crippling a little bit your hand or what you're doing, because today the variety of ways to implement stuff is like enormous. So this is why I think that understanding each and every pattern and the trade-offs for each pattern, how it is being used, or what is the effect on performance on your users or performance on the browser or things like that. This is where you have to understand these topics very well. Even though you're probably going to pick some framework at the beginning of the application building, um, do it wisely and do it with a framework that might have more than one way of implementing rendering.
I feel the decision is pretty easy on when to go static, like fully, again, whatever, like you said, blogs or some kind of marketing website with minimal interactivity, stuff like that. But again, I think that the decision becomes more nuanced and it's trickier to parse when we're in this, like, do I want SSR with some kind of hydration? Do I want to try to use the islands architecture? Like, is my typical user here frequently enough where it's like fine to just go fully client side and like send it all down the wire once, and then from then on it's like fast enough? Is there like, are there good signals that you've found that are kind of your, like your touch points, your cornerstones on how to make that decision?
It's a very trial of error. You're trying to analyze the current page and what you're building, and through that you will understand how to implement it. I won't say page by page because there are applications with 1,000 pages, but mostly a lot of things in the application are repeating themselves. So if we have a very, very interactive application or page, you will probably want to do a CSR in that page because you need all the JavaScript ready for usage in your client side, and you need the interactivity very fast, and you want a good INP, the Web Core Vital measurement. On the other hand, if you have a page which is like, I don't know, fees, prices, something that isn't changing occasionally, you can make it static and then cache it in a CDN or something like that. And then it's going to be very, very fast loading and rendered. And if it's not changing over time, then you gain a lot of less cache expenses or things like that. If you have lower interactivity, I will probably go with server-side rendering. I will server-side render the page, or if it's a personalized page with low interactivity, then I will go to server-side rendering and render most of the content in the server, and only the interactivity will be loaded later on. The hunch is how much interactivity you want. For example, island architecture in a very, very massive interactive page. This is something that you don't gain anything from the island architecture.
Yeah.
So this is where it's not shining at all. But if you want a lot of interactivity, go the CSR, the client side rendering way. It's not a rule of thumb, but this is the guts feeling for each and every implementation for a different page in the application. And if the framework that you're using gives you all the opportunities or all the patterns, like a lot of the current frameworks we have, then you need to understand those things beforehand, before implementing the page, and then just implement it in the right pattern.
Yeah. So you brought up there for SSR in particular, and I think this is a good thought that like is not often considered, that I think the strongest use cases here are often like personalized content that is not changing for a given user. It's like this is what they're going to see, but they're not going to have to like mutate it or mess with it in any way. And I think that those are very clean candidates for SSR. Can we talk a little bit then about, like, in those instances, is SSR always the correct choice, or does the islands architecture have some advantages, like for given flavors, for given types of apps?
The island architecture, because it's shipping HTML, it's supposed to load faster than SSR, because in SSR, you're spending not a lot, but some sort of time in the server to render the page, the personalized page. And then you ship it. And the islands, you're shipping the HTML very fast, and then all the islands, the places of interactivity in your page are like hydrated later on. It's a trade-off how much interactivity there is in the page. If there is no interactivity at all, just one or two buttons, I don't see a gain on islands usage or in SSR usage. Probably they will like give you plus minus the same, not the same, but probably islands will run faster a little bit, but SSR will give you a good enough performance in terms of the time of the page rendering.
In your experience, is there significant overhead to trying to utilize the islands architecture versus like a framework that's more SSR out of the box?
No, I don't think that there is something like that. It depends on your knowledge about the framework, and that's it. Okay, because if you're not coming from, if you have never used Astro or Marco, the main frameworks that gives you islands architecture, then it depends on the learning curve of you learning the how to use the framework, and then it's like just utilize it and that's it. If you're talking about frameworks like Remix or Next or whatever, or SSR, then it's like, again, you need to know how the framework works in order to generate the pages. And sometimes the decision is something that you will do, and maybe you will regret the decision later on because you use the islands with the islands framework, and you have a very interactive pages in your application, and that's breaking up all the islands idea. Sometimes you will create some CSR application. I see it a lot. People running and creating a React application for something which is very static, and you don't need to hydrate everything in the client side and wait for it. It's like you could have created it with server-side rendering or static rendering and get more or boost your performance. So again, it's understanding what you are going to solve or what is the application you are building, and then use the I would say the right tool to build it. That's it.
You mentioned kind of trying to not be surprised by like, oh, like, you know, you end up actually trying to do islands architecture and then finding that almost everything needs to be interactive and not being able to utilize it very well. Using any of these patterns in real projects, have you found there to be kind of a particular methodology or maybe a given framework that is kind of least surprising in your capacity to utilize rendering patterns for the sake of performance?
I would say no. It's like I'm mostly coming to companies as a consultant, helping them to do the right pick at the beginning of the project, if this is a project or sometimes comes to clean up all the mess that they did after they
Prior.
built
Yeah.
the application and created it. My forte is like performance tuning, so I will like go and understand what was the framework that is currently being used, and how I need to improve the performance of the application or the website that was built. So profiling the entire application, understanding what the customer did, and then try to solve for them. So it's not like utilizing a framework for me. It's like more understanding what is the main issues in performance and trying to adjust the application that the customers are currently building in order to make them move faster, perform better, and maybe impose other patterns. For example, it's much more easier to come to a next framework application or next build application and try to move things around with the implementation of ISR inside of Next, or the static rendering that of component that Next allows you to create, and it's things like that. So again, it's like, what is my customer is doing and how can I improve what they did?
You brought up Next a couple times here. Is there like, are you kind of relieved when you see that they're using Next? Do you find any frameworks to be kind of easier to fix, and like air quoting, or like clean up the worst parts? Are there some where like there's more options available, or it's easier to tune given routes?
I would say something different instead. When I come and I see Next and I understand what the customer tried to build, most of the time they don't need Next to build it. Okay.
Yeah.
For example, a customer that built some very massive forms application with Next in SSR without any SSR or static rendering modes. It's like you created a pure CSR application with Next and you didn't gain anything from the framework itself.
Yeah.
So this is where I like suggest to not move from Next, but to try and change how things are implemented. You said the Next, that this is where, for example, TanStack Start could have been a better choice to the developers, or framework like, I don't know, Qwik, or even not Astro because it's too interactive. Me coming to my customers and seeing the framework like Next, it's not something that makes me happy, or because I will need to understand what's the purpose of the framework. As I said, in one company they used Next and they didn't have to use it. In another company they used Next, but they created an implementation of Angular modules with React. So it was like, what are you doing? A company, the tech lead there came from an Angular background. The manager said you need to create something in React, so we created Angular models and Angular concepts inside React, and it was like mind-blowing how you can, wreck an application from the start. So it's not only the framework that you're using, it's what you're building and how you build it.
Right. Do you feel all of these, all kind of four of these major rendering patterns will still be common in five years?
I think that we are like currently building hybrid pattern or hybrid rendering apps, and this is going to be how we are going to build the application in 3 to 5 years from now. It's if a framework will give you the option to use SSR, CSR, and static rendering, and you will create with the framework all the options for each page according to what the page needs, then you will gain a lot. So the combination of all these patterns inside one framework might be very helpful. Whether there is a framework that is doing this currently, there are frameworks that aim to do most of it. I don't know about any framework that gives you all the opportunities, and by a flag you're like, this page is like static, this page is like SSR, this page is CSR, and etc. etc.
I don't think most devs have an opportunity or the burden or the privilege, depending on your perspective, of like interacting with all these frameworks with much frequency. Is there any that you're kind of more seeing the direction that the current development is going, that you're kind of more like, this looks like, in the next few years, it may be the one that we end up using like more often than not in a lot of apps because it solves most of the problems pretty well? Do you have any of those that you're kind of a little bit more optimistic about or keeping a closer eye on?
Seeing two, I think, frameworks in the React environment that will probably stay for a couple of more years. It's like Next.js and the TanStack Start. I've already mentioned them. Yeah. And then whether to go to each or one of them, it's like a decision of you, the listeners of the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want CSR, then TanStack Start is your friend. If you want the SSR, static rendering, then Next is more like your friend. And you do the picking of the framework that you're going to use. But these are the most, I think, useful frameworks to know today in the React world. And they will probably stay for a couple of more years, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. If you had to impart listeners with one rule about kind of thinking about rendering strategies and how to choose them for a given application or business ask, is there anything you'd kind of suggest they think about, or a perspective that they take?
Learn what you want to do in the current page before you're implementing it. Okay, that's the rule. Before implementing, design how you want to implement it. If the page is more super interactive, probably go the CSR way. If the page is like not interactive at all, static rendering. If it's less interactive or not a lot of interactivity, islands or SSR. Depends on whatever. These are the main rule of thumbs that I'm using today.
Nice. Well, I think that's kind of as good a note as any to end on. Thank you for coming on and chatting with me today. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully there'll be more development in this space, and we'll have more to talk about soon.
Hopefully. Thank you for hosting me.
Of course. Have a good one.